Hello and welcome to Deep in the D-Pad, where we explore all things gaming through an intellectual lens. I'm your friendly neighborhood host and game designer Carlos, and with me, as always, is RK Taylor.
What's up?
On today's episode, we're going to be discussing revenge, and how it manifests in ourselves and video games, as well as other pop culture artifacts. Before we get into today's main topic, let's start with some D-Pad delights. So recently, I've kind of full dived into the Psychonauts series, and my D-Pad delight for today is Psychonauts 2. It doesn't have much to do with revenge. I don't really have many delightful stories around revenge, but in Psychonauts 2, I had a really delightful moment right in the beginning, because I had most recently just finished playing Psychonauts 1 and then playing through Psychonauts Rhombus of Ruin in VR, and the intro of Psychonauts 2 just sort of picked up right where everything left off. So it just felt like, even though 10 plus years had passed since the last game had come out or something like that, it just felt like nothing missed a step, and that was so nice. And I saw references to certain things that I'm only gonna fully understand if I had played both games, and pretty much from there the game just kept being delightful, more or less. So that's my D-Pad delight of the week, is Psychonauts just following through on all their details throughout multiple titles and really executing at least the intro of their highly anticipated second game very well.
Yeah, so you appreciate the continuity between games. They don't leave much hanging, or things are. It's if there was a cliffhanger, then it was kind of fulfilled in the sequel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, things the main antagonist of the first game ends up becoming a very key focal point in the second game. That character is still kind of a key point, but not as key as the main character of that VR game. That character, and the thing is that's great, is you don't need to play these games. They do their due diligence to give you a nice stylish previously on Psychonauts type thing. You get to notice a little bit more, even if you watch that thing, you're not gonna know why Coach Oleander is pushing a mermaid tail off of him when he awakens or something like that. And that's where players who have played the game are oh right, that's what I did that puzzle, fuck yeah. Or if somebody makes a little offhand remark, that might be referencing something that happened elsewhere.
Right, yeah. That's nice that they have little bits, treats that they sprinkle throughout that, are narratively continuous, but also it isn't obtuse for a new player, and, they're accommodating both sets of players.
Yeah, exactly.
And the first game came out a long time ago, if I remember correctly. Was that original Xbox or 360 or?
It was original Xbox, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, and the second one came out 2021, so that's a really long time between games, and for, Tim Schafer to be just sitting on those jokes or the mermaid tail after all these years,
And it's wild that they also jump platforms to kind of continue their narrative. If you want the full sequential, you got to play on an original Xbox, then you got to play on a VR headset, whether it be a Vive or an Oculus, and then to go to play Psychonauts 2, you got to be on modern hardware, what is it, Xbox Series X, Windows, PC, that type of thing.
Yeah, Psychonauts is available. It's backwards compatible on the series.
Oh, nice.
Consoles, just so you know. So okay. I played it pretty recently. Actually, I played it a year ago, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think through the store. It's not free or anything, but whatever. Anyway, okay. Yeah, I was gonna tell you about Jeopardy Play Show finally today, and yeah. I have it is become a, I don't know, a meme or something at this point that I am constantly delaying discussing Jeopardy Play Show.
Yep.
I think there have been 3 separate episodes where I'm I don't have anything to talk about for a D-Pad delight, so let me just finally get to, it's kind of the substitute teacher of my D-Pad delights or something. But yeah. I thought of something this morning. that has to do with revenge. I was watching.
So Jeopardy play show's going back on the bench. Like
back on the
Jeopardy
bench,
play
yeah,
show
man.
got super excited. Like it was all antsy, fucking patting the bat on its feet, getting ready to go hit the ball, and then you're like, "Psych, no, I got something else. Get back in the
Exactly.
in the pit."
Yeah, Jeopardy play show is like what I think I'm gonna talk about multiple times, and then it's the morning of. I'm just like my mind is racing, and I'm like, I can't use it today. I gotta keep this going. So I was thinking about this game, Squid Game, or this show called Squid Game. Have you watched that yet?
Oh yeah, I watched the trailer for it like multiple times. I'm 50-50 because I don't know if I can do more battle royale shit. Like I want that. I want that show to be good. The sets look fucking awesome. Like there's some MC Escher like super colorful bananas in pajamas looking set, and I'm like
bananas in pajamas.
Yeah,
Oh
it's like staircases going everywhere in super like wild colors, and I'm like I fucking love this. Like I want it to be good. Please tell me about it.
Yeah, no, it is. It's pretty engaging, but I saw another show. So this is a Korean show, and I was really surprised because it was number 2 on Netflix, like a few days ago, and that really piqued my interest because I can't think of like any other foreign TV show that's ever been, like, you know, in the top 3 spots on Netflix that I've noticed. So I was like, wow, this must be like really engaging. You know, I mean, I'm sure that there could be other ones, but I have never come across them. And also I'm just curious about what's going on with Korea because I feel like there's a lot of like good content, like movies and TV shows coming from Korea, and like K-pop is like not something I listen to, but something that people care about. And I'm like, whoa, like Korea is like kind of like a cultural force at this point, you know? And there was another Korean show that I watched called Alice in Borderlands, and it's a similar premise to this one where it's like, you know, there's essentially in both of these there are games that like people are playing for with their lives, you know, and so the stakes are very high, you know, everybody like, you know, a bunch of people are gonna die, but it has like the game component and these elements of surprise. And I was thinking that that's really only possible to do this successfully in a world where limited series are, you know, like a form of media. I don't really remember limited series when we were kids, for example. You know, it seemed like the goal of TV shows back in the day was like, let's get to 100 or let's pump out as many shows as we can. And it, you know, if we've like milked this for everything it's worth, then that's great. You know, then we got all the money that we possibly could have. But I think like limited series are more about, there's something like artful about it where you have to understand the whole arc. You know, you have to understand, you know, the whole season is the whole show. So you're not trying to, it's almost an announcement that you're not trying to have multiple seasons and you're not going to try to milk this. And for things that require suspense and surprise, like these thriller, gamey type of TV shows, I think it's a perfect medium. So I've really enjoyed that. I recommend it to anybody who is interested in seeing games in TV shows that are not reality TV shows. You know, I like, there are a limited number of these kinds of this, like, it's a pretty specific genre, but there are a few things out there now, and you can find them.
Depending on like what specifically you're going for, I think this is fairly safe to call the death game genre. I don't know if there are battle royale elements, like if they're, you know, if people need
death
to kill each other.
Yeah. The Circle. Was there something called Circle or something like that? I think that may have been like that.
There's a reality show on Netflix called The Circle.
I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about a drama or like a thriller drama. Yeah, Death Game. I think that's a really apt name for it. And it's kind of odd that there's, I mean, Saw was doing that, right? Like Saw is essentially death gaming.
Yeah, I think like, so it's interesting you bring up Saw, because like, yes, it like the main thing, right, was like, want to play a game, and it's like, but it's not actually a game. Like, it's always like, oh, here's an escape room, I guess. But like for these death game type movies, and one of them I think you would find hilarious is called As the Gods Will. As the Gods Will is a death game movie about like some weird supernatural Daruma statue doll. With Daruma, a Daruma doll in Japan is a like big red pot looking thing with like a face in the middle of it, like a person's face kind of. And so anyway, this possessed like Daruma doll appears and is like, we're gonna play red light, green light, 1, 2, 3, and like the things happen, people are moving, red light, green light, 1, 2, 3, and then everyone thinks it's all fun and games. Somebody gets spotted moving when the Daruma turns around, and then his head blows up and it's gore everywhere. And boom, death game. Like, that's it. Like, the long and short of my tangent with As the Gods Will is, like, the death game genre, I feel, is, like, really popular in places like Japan and Korea, and only kind of drifted over to the West with things like the Hunger Games and, like, maybe a couple of other things. I do think we tried to maybe do the quote unquote death game, but the way we do it is so much more, I don't know, like, it's not as playful, I guess I should say. Like, playing red light, green light, or what's it, Red Rover, like in the Squid Game trailer, that is playful while
That's
being
red light,
dark
green
as
light.
Fuck.
They do red light, green light is the name of the first episode of Squid Game.
Oh, okay.
See, one of the key differences between something like Hunger Games is that that is already a dystopian world, right? It's not just like whereas these other games, it's the everyday world, and then within the everyday world, there's this pocket of evil where they're playing these like really sickening games. And I think that kind of the juxtaposition of like the mundane reality, the everyday existence with the immersion of these, like, that's part of what like it makes people seem even crazier or more unhinged if they were just a banker yesterday and then today they're like blowing someone's head off because because the rules of the game are dictating that. If you're raised in the Hunger Games, being a Hunger Games champion is less like I guess to me it seems less like contrived, right? Even, or like
because you've kind of been conditioned, like it's almost like that the Hunger Games is like watching football. Like, you've been like, oh, okay, this is just like the sport and whatever. Whereas, like, in any of these other shows where like the whole world isn't screwed up, it's just like, what is going on? Why is this happening to me?
It's deviating from macrocultural norms. Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting at. And not to say that you should, like, people in the Hunger Games shouldn't try to escape the conditioning that they've experienced, but there's almost something more like psychologically understandable about that. Like you said, football can be really might be considered really barbaric 50 years from now. I mean, it's already kind of getting some of that with like concussion and whatnot. But really quick, these games, these death games are also set up a paradigm of revenge. Like it's very easy to imagine how, I don't want to give any spoilers, so I'm not going to talk about any specific instances, but when we think about revenge narratives, the idea that some folks will thrive on the kind of anarchy or the violence, and then there will be some maybe like meeker or weaker folks who are emotionally responding to what they're witnessing, right? To the violence or the horror that they're witnessing. That right there sets up the arc of revenge. And often we would root for the person who's less violent and the person who's more emotionally connected, or maybe trying to save other people if they're exhibiting altruism. So all of those, kinds of moods, they're social experiments, right? These death games often have like a bunch of players, and a bunch of people will get eliminated really quickly, and then you'll be left with some kind of like archetypal types of personalities, and then the ones that resonate with us are usually the hero type ones. We can get all into that later, but I don't know.
Sounds like Death Games is going to be on the menu soon.
Death Games!
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about like Death Games and a lot about Korean cinema with you, because that's something that I fucking love, and I know you haven't watched Old Boy, so now I'm revealing that to the rest of our audience. He hasn't seen Old Boy, folks.
I have not. You're
Real
right.
Old Boy. We're going to change that. We're going to make that happen. But speaking of revenge, I guess let's just start with, I don't know, what does revenge feel like? I think that's like a decent place to start.
Okay.
Like, I guess anecdotally, revenge to me is like this intense sensation of like, I have been wronged and I must see that wrong fixed. And there's some sort of like visceral heat behind that desire to see that wrong fixed. Probably coming somewhat from like the anger or the indignation of like being wronged in the first place, that is now fueling my like anger and intensity and focus to like have that fixed. But at the same time that I am trying to like move forward and fix that, I now, depending on how much like how into my bag I am with this revenge thing, I may be completely like blocking out all this other stuff around me that like could clearly help me, but I'm just so like drunk off of this feeling that I'm like, no, like this has to be fucking settled now.
Interesting that you refer to it as like a drunkenness. There's like the sensation that you're almost under the influence of, a chemical, like the revenge is kind of overtaking you or showing you sides of your personality that maybe you didn't realize were there. I don't know in how many like ways in my actual life I've experienced like the feelings of revenge.
Mm-hmm.
I try to approach people, and this is certainly in the last like more like the last 10 years of my life, right? But I try to approach situations like more holistically, where I'm trying to understand the parts, and like there's like a curiosity and like almost like an ecological approach to like how is the system functioning. So if someone does something I don't like, right? Let's say it's extreme, right? Let's say if I'm examining like someone's abusive behavior, right? Instead of wanting to get even or wanting to punish them or commit more suffering, commit an act that will engender more suffering, my goal is to try to understand that and then figure out how we can diffuse it, basically. Like it's like, how can we prevent future situations like this from occurring? So that's almost like anti-revenge.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel motivated by vengeance. But then there are times where, like, to take a really trivial and also topical example, if I'm playing, like I remember like we talked about when I was trying to beat Kingdom Hearts 1 like a couple of years ago. I was doing a playthrough and I was like livid at like the final boss and like how there were so many bosses right after the other. And like I felt this sense of like after dying so many times, it was like, I need to fucking do this. Like I have like the onus is on me to triumph, like and it felt like it would have been wrong to not. And I didn't have, my emotions weren't directed at like the pixels on the screen per se. It wasn't, I was having this more like, I wasn't so deep in the narrative that like I was imagining myself as Sora taking on, the antagonist, right? It wasn't like I wouldn't call it revenge, but what would you call that? I don't know. Do you have a better word for that? Like the need to overcome, or
I know that exact feeling because I was in that exact predicament when Kingdom Hearts 1 had come out. And as far as I know, that's actually the core feeling game loop of like the Dark Souls series, right? Like, is that revenge? I don't know. Like, I kind of think it would be revenge, but like, if that is revenge, then I would say then revenge is like existent within, say, Rocket League, right? Like, because the game is kind of like it's outdoing you. You're dying, which means most likely it's a failure to perform the actions in a timely manner, something like that. And so the blame to some extent or a fair extent falls onto you as a player. This is kind of like challenge versus frustration, right? So like as long as you feel like you had the tools to take care of the challenge but still messed up, you're blaming yourself, and that's like fueling this thing of like, fuck, like I know I can do better. I know I could beat this boss. He's a piece of shit. I'm the cool guy. I got powers. I just need to know how to use them. As opposed to like, wow, this boss has like a 50-foot long sword and I can never get fucking close and I have no moves to get close to him. Now I just know the game is like fucking me over, and there's like less of that. I think because that's more defeating, there's less of that fire for like revenge. Whereas like if you see that you're the one that messed up and you're still coming back to this fairly understandable and predictable, more importantly, like scenario combat setup, the boss fight, right? It's always playing out. He's doing the same moves, same movements, yada yada, right? You're basically like trying to tackle the same math problem over and over and over again, and then you need to go back to the drawing board and try a new hypothesis. So it's like, it's weird, like scientific method cross revenge.
I love that you're using the example of a math problem, because it reminds me of a quote. I may have told you this before, but Bertrand Russell was like a 20th century philosopher and mathematician who like was like seriously suicidal at points in his life and like didn't kill himself because he was like so curious about math. That's like my favorite philosophy fact. It's like, how dedicated to the game. But he also said something like, if you're upset about something, right? If you're having an argument with someone, ostensibly there is a fact of the matter, right? There is a truth to find out, to uncover. And the idea of that one would be emotionally heated because of a particular debate is doesn't make any sense. Like you're automatically personalizing something that has an objective truth. And the objective truth, like there's no need to be upset about something that is true because you have no control over it. You're just a being that's existing within a space where this thing is true. You used the word indignation, I think, or indignant, and I think that's so key to revenge. With a math problem or with a Sora trying to be the antagonist, there's a lack of an emotional dimension there. Or even like you mentioned Rocket League, right? Someone scores on you, you score on them. That's competition. It's not really revenge. It has to be, if you're tilted, it may feel like revenge, but revenge is a really deep emotional path that one feels, right? Hamlet is completely predicated on Hamlet's dad being killed by the current king, Claudius, right? And he finds that out in Act 1, and then everything that spills out from there is, like Ophelia winds up killing herself and all of this, right? Like, or to take, like a Lion King, right, is maybe a more accessible or more commonly, it's a reference that people will be more familiar with. That's similar, based on similar material, right? Like, so if we think about how evil it is for Scar to kill Mufasa and then makes Simba think that it was his own fault, that's so sickening, and it's such an evil thing to do that when Simba realizes that it's I think it's possibly more than just about creating a sense of justice, but it's like, I need to punish this person. I have a right almost to enact my anger on him because he dishonored my father, right?
Right. To bring it to a more modern example, I think we can take the simple act of killing someone in Halo. This goes one of two ways, right? You either get killed, and also it doesn't have to be just Halo, but I think we kind of really saw it pop off in Halo, like in the original trilogy. But when you die in Halo, your body either just stays there for the 4 seconds you stare at it, or the person who killed you walks over your body and proceeds to crouch rapidly and repeatedly over your body. And that is the moment where revenge starts to get fucking seated. Because that's the indignation, right? It's like, we were having friendly competition, you killed me, but now you're performing this fucking act on my corpse. Yeah, you're taunting me. Yeah,
it's essentially asking that person to come back and fight you. It's like, I'll do this again. Like, I'm not afraid of you. It's like,
there's not really something like that. There's not really something like that in Rocket League, as far as I can tell. Like, I can dunk on someone, but I can't.
Calculated.
Oh, true. Calculated. Somehow calculated doesn't feel as indignant as getting teabagged in Halo.
Well, there's something sexual about it. I mean, it's rapey for sure. It's it's an act of sexual violence, and it's not actually happening. It's not like this. It's not like you see your balls come out and then they're in the mouth of this person.
It's like a Lego block version of it.
It's a Lego block version. And honestly, I mean, what more degrading thing? Imagine if you had an actual dead body in front of you, and if someone teabagged that dead body. I mean, that would be an absolutely horrendous, sickening thing to observe, so the fact that someone is trying to simulate that in a game as a way of being like, fuck you, that's disturbing, the fact that that's kind of a norm, but, and the fact that it evokes revenge, I think is understandable, but I would still say, I think that a true sense of revenge is a more deep rooted, I think it often involves, maybe family or maybe even political stuff, perhaps
I think it's often an attack on something you love or value greatly, whether that be a person, a thing, or a value,
even ideas.
A value or an idea. If those things get attacked or destroyed, then that like has a big enough impact that it can like lead someone down the path, right? So like speaking on that, right, some of these popular examples that I can connect to that is like the loss of like loved one or something important is like John Wick's dog. Like John premise of John Wick, his wife dies, his wife post mortem set him up to like get a puppy to help him go through it, and then like, you know,
wow, that's PS I love you, but with like a pet. That's crazy.
Happenstance comes up, like some Russian mobster guy appears and they like rob his house, and it's like, okay, you've killed the Master Chief, you robbed his house, all right. But no, then they go and they kill his puppy like right in front of him, and it's like, well, that's the teabagging part. And this is why John Wick goes to his basement with a sledgehammer and takes out all of his guns and comes back to his life of murder that like he had left. And that's where the revenge kicks off. Like he explains it towards the end of the film. Like, it's not really much spoilers. He's just like, I lost the one thing that brought me to this fucking world after I was a hitman, and she gave me one thing to keep me tethered, and you fucking killed that one thing. So yeah, I think I'm back. And then he goes on to kill the rest of the crew. And with Kill Bill, it's more of like the betrayal of trust, because and I guess this is kind of I'll keep it as light spoiler for Kill Bill, for anyone who didn't see any of the huge pop culture movies we're talking about.
When did that come out? Like 2000? I haven't seen John Wick.
God. I know. And you haven't seen Old Boy. We're gonna fix these things. Like,
one thing really quick before you move on to Kill Bill, though, about John Wick is that you know, I really like that premise that you know, the dogs representing innocence and you know, unconditional love, you know, potentially, but also, you know, it's a proxy for his wife. This was a gift from his wife, and it's what is helping him process his grief, you know, helping him cope. So just it seems like a very layered objective correlative, as you know, that's like a symbol basically, right? It's an emotionally resonant. It has multiple layers of emotional resonance in this one object, you know?
Yeah, and so with Kill Bill, I talked about, you know, murdering a living thing, you know, taking away a living thing. With Kill Bill, I think it's more of like the destruction of the idea of trust, because someone who, the main character in Kill Bill, I'll just say like Uma Thurman, because I can't remember, like, oh, Kiddo was the actual Kill Bill character's name, Kiddo something. So Uma Thurman's character gets betrayed by like the person she loves, and is like attempted assassination. She wiggles her left toe, punches her way out of a coffin and all this shit, and gets her revenge. But it all starts off with like, yo, we are a pack of cool kids. We are going to have each other's back to the end. And at the last second, she turns around and gets shot in the face. And it's like, wow, I can't trust anybody. Like, I learned from the fucking best karate master. I learned from all of these different assassins, and now I am out for myself. And I'm going to take down every last one of you because you betrayed my trust. And I know y'all have families, and I'm going to keep it business and not fucking kill them. I'm going to kill you. That to me is like way more, that to me is like a little more badass. Like, rather than like burn it all to the ground, John Wick style, she's like, there's literally a scene where she is like having a knife to knife death fight with someone, and then her daughter comes home, and they like pause because of this. I guess it's kind of like maybe Tarantino's idea of like honor while fighting, but like they pause, and like she goes up to her room, and it's like, okay, we're gonna have this fight here, because, and both parties acknowledge it. It's like, yo, you tried to kill me, I'm here to fucking tie things up. And the other person's like, yeah, I really wish things didn't have to play out like this, but I did try to kill you, so like, let's have this fight and see what happens. And so that all is to say is like, they acknowledge there was a heavy betrayal of trust and like brotherhood, because this pack of assassins were so tight, they traveled together. So for that double betrayal to happen, it's like, yeah, shit needs consequences, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of this sounds like what I think of as like stakes, right? Where it's like, how can we raise the stakes, right? Like, the multiple levels of betrayal are certainly fostering that. They're certainly like creating an emotional depth that becomes easier to resonate with. You know, the more extreme circumstances, when we try to put ourselves in those shoes, the more extreme they are, you know, even if we are not like 100% able to interface with that world, if we got 80% there and it's super extreme, then we are really far beyond the bounds of our normal lives in terms of our ability to experience revenge. But one thing I think that we should note too is that revenge, like the architecture of it, narratively, right? Like the way that we create a revenge story, it doesn't seem all that complex to me, right? It almost reminds me of like the Pokemon games where like it's always like you have a nemesis. His name is Gary. He's your rival, and it's like kind of this built-in dynamic of like we've all met people in our lives who we didn't get along with, or perhaps we were competing with in some way for someone's attention, or something, right? Like that seems to be the Gary and Ash type of dynamic where it's like we both want Professor Oak to be our daddy, and like he's only going to be daddy to one of us, so like whoever proves themselves, and we're going to have cockfighting with Chikorritas in order to like make this, in order to get daddy to like love us,
right.
And that's not really revenge, that's more rivalry, but the idea of revenge is someone is going through life, they experience a loss of a resource or love or their personal safety usually at the expense of someone else, right? So there's a target for that they can map their revenge onto, and then due to the antagonist creating this deficiency of resources, they become more powerful, right? Either their status grows, the antagonist's status grows, or maybe they have more money now, or something like that is happening, and then the protagonist naturally will want the antagonist to not be as well off as they are because they've been harmed by them, right? So B wrongs A wants B to be wronged too, right? It's like kind of like a mirror type of situation, So if you hurt me, then I'm going to want to hurt you, and that may not look the same way. If you take all my money, I may want you to die. I may want to hurt someone in your family or something. There are different ways that we can hurt each other, but it's all circling around this idea of how can I cause harm to those who have harmed me?
Yeah, I wonder if there's anything at all very strongly tying like the Hammurabi's code with this, because revenge is essentially an eye for an eye, right? Like, is it just that like that law or that code came from that feeling, that visceral revenge feeling, and then kind of turned into a law at some point? Or is it something greater that just like this is a desire that like everybody wants? Like if I am to be greatly wronged, then that great wronging must go on to someone else.
My thinking for the, this is totally speculative, this is definitely out of both of our depths, but my thinking is that the legal element is more for the civility of society, right? If everybody, the idea of something of laws being draconian is like let's say the law is like if you smoke marijuana, we will behead you, right? The chance that you're going to smoke marijuana, the risk reward calculus there, suddenly marijuana seems like the devil, like you're not trying to get that cabbage, you want your head, so that the Hammurabi code, it's maybe not about pot, but it's like if you steal from someone, we're going to chop your hand off. If that were a law, even like you could be extremely hungry, right? You could really want to steal someone else's food, but by engaging in that behavior, you're going to lose your arm and then you'll never be able to work again, potentially, or it might become gangrenous or something. You're risking something much greater than missing one meal. So it's disincentivizing the committing all acts of crime. I don't think that revenge actually has to be eye for an eye, because that is perfect symmetry, right?
Yeah.
And revenge can be like, if someone hurts you, if someone kills someone in your family, let's say, you could want to kill every member of their family, and that isn't that's not a situation of parody. That's the emotions are boiling.
Revenge usually is way messier. Like we mentioned the drunkenness at the beginning, but like that's definitely like the best word to put on it, because it's clouding you, it's making you move sloppily. If you're doing attacks, they're going all over the place. Speaking of, being drunk with rage and revenge, being messy as all hell, and killing everything until you feel good, which asterisk on that big last part. God of War. The original God of War trilogy, starring Kratos of whatever the fuck he comes from, I don't remember. He is tricked during some fucking battle, he's tricked by Ares, the actual Ares, to kill his family. And so Kratos, by his own hand, kills his wife and I believe his daughter. And from there is sent into, that's basically the start of the story. Like the opening cutscene, the God of War is like Kratos is casting himself from Mount Olympus. He climbed the top of Mount Olympus, fucking jumped off because he does not want to be on this planet anymore. He was tricked into killing his own family. He's stricken with grief. And then in that moment of like suicidal confirmation, some god reaches out to him and like gives him the energy he needs to then start killing every like aggressive living thing until he starts getting to gods. And then long story short, between God of Wars 1 to God of War 3, he goes on killing the entire Greek pantheon and destroys the entire planet due to it, because these gods are in control of certain elements and stuff like that. So like when Poseidon dies, the entire world floods. And so on and so forth. So like that's a revenge tale in games that spans like several titles. And you know, we have the modern God of War games, which is still a fair degree about revenge, but it's not necessarily Kratos going to take revenge immediately. If anything, now it kind of seems like more characters have a real good reason to get revenge on Kratos than vice versa.
I want to juxtapose that with Oedipus, right?
Yeah.
In Oedipus, like he, you know, basically a prophet foresees that you know, Oedipus is gonna kill his father, marry his mom, blah 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 blah. He winds up trying to like resist this, but like the prophecy comes true, and he unwittingly kills his dad. You know, his like he unwittingly, he doesn't. I think he's adopted, so you know he's like marching through town on a road. This guy comes up and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And then he like winds up killing his dad. Right, that wound up being his father. They got into like a duel or whatever, and then he, you know, continues marching on, and then like the queen is there and the king didn't return, and it's like, oh, I guess I'll marry this lady now, and it's like low key his mom, right? And then eventually he finds that out, and then he blinds himself, right?
Yeah.
He like, and that is insane. Like the fact that so the difference here, those I view those as very narratively similar, but the difference is that Oedipus takes out his indignation on himself and wants to generate his own suffering, whereas Kratos is externalizing that, and you know, and I don't know if we would call the like maybe shame or guilt is more what Oedipus is feeling rather than revenge. But go ahead. What do you? I could tell by your smile that you're trying to.
Also, just to kind of like add on to the Oedipal thing you bring up, one of my favorite lines is at one of my favorite lines in video games, or one that I will just rattle off because it's kind of like fun to say, is at the start of God of War 3 when Kratos is literally like, he is on one of the 4 titans that is climbing Mount Olympus or whatever. Like, he's like, Zeus, your son has returned! And like, it's very clear, like, oh, he's pissed, he's got daddy issues, and he's about to kill the fuck out of his dad. It gives me big Oedipus vibes, even though the way it went down in Oedipus is like way more like coincidental dramatic irony, as is the format and stuff like that, whereas this is like, you know, very streamlined, like straightforward fucking Greek epic, like, we're not gonna find out this secret, I'm just gonna know it, and I'm gonna be mad and kill you for it.
Yeah, I don't know, the more we're talking about revenge, the more like it's not sitting well with me that we have so many of these narratives. And I really think we could just go on all day and list them. Like, no, I'm completely serious. Like, where's the like ethos of compassion, you know, or even like the old school idea of heroism? You know, why does it have to be muddied by these like emotional turmoil? You know, like in order for us to resonate with it, like, are we so broken as a culture that we need, or you know, as a species maybe? You know, I mean, it's been going on for hundreds of years. There are epics that are predicated on revenge, right? So there's something really deep seated about this in our psyches. But I just kind of wish that we had something more wholesome to cling to. I guess I'm being a baby.
Well, you know,
here.
we have our fair amount of, and you know, we are in American society, so like the most high performing media is usually the violent stuff, whether it be guns, martial arts, or what have you, right? So that's kind of some of my backing logic for why revenge tales are like so popular. It's like, one, it like fills this checkbox that we all like to watch in movies or games. Two, it's this like very, very relatable sensation. And if anything, they are like fantasies that we often might like play out in our heads, but know can never like actually happen in society. And seeing that within a fictional like on-screen presentation, it may give you maybe a little bit of that catharsis, or potentially be a good cautionary tale as to like what revenge can really bring. Because something that I like about seeing John Wick in theaters, I think I saw John Wick 2 and 3 in theaters, was like it half the fun was like watching these like brutal Jackie Chan death fights play out, but the other half, and that's the revenge tale. Like, yeah, I want those people to die because they're gonna hurt my good boy John Wick. But the other half of the fun was hearing the audience be like kind of disgusted at the movie and or themselves when like especially like interesting brutal deaths came out. Like John Wick kills someone in a library using like a fucking encyclopedia, and like, I don't need to explain how, but just like in how that happened, you heard the audience go from like, ooh, ooh, to like, oh, and like, and that was great. Like, I think that's why revenge tales also like really hit well, is that like more often than not, they tend to be a cautionary tale or some sort of tale that's like, you don't want to do this. Like even John Wick, dude. John Wick is still, to the fourth movie, facing the consequences of the fact that he even fucking came out of retirement in the first movie. And literally has the whole world after him.
I like the cautionary tale idea. I mean, it's like, I love The Sopranos, right? But it's not like I want to be Tony Soprano. Like, he's a sociopath. And he's just, the acts that he commits are atrocious. And there is a lot of, revenge.
I mean, the very ending, I have no clue what the series finale is about, but it was so popular at the time. Like, I know visually like what is there, and I can only assume that it has to do with revenge of some type. Right? Like, there's just a cycle of violence within that.
Don't even stop setting me
That's
up.
That's fine.
I do like your point about catharsis, though, because I think that's the other side of the coin, right? Cautionary tale is basically, the reason I bring up to the Tony Soprano thing is, he's an example of an anti-hero, and a lot of these revenge stories are predicated on these like base emotions, I'm sure there are people who believe that revenge or vengeance is virtuous. Because I don't lean that way, I tend to think that in order for a revenge story to be predicated on like anti-heroism, basically, I don't think a true hero will be engaging in something that, that like is this kind of intoxicating feeling that is adjacent to rage, or, the idea that you're trying to generate human suffering seems like a negative to me. But there is something cathartic about it, because we don't live in a just world, and there are a lot of people that we, whether we could talk about, people at the corporate level, we could talk about like big pharma, pushing Oxycontins, like we could
the
talk
Sadlers,
about
right?
I don't know,
the Sadlers or the Sacklers or whatever, the Purdue Pharma family that literally just recently got off with like a pretty easy fine for literally causing and perpetuating a nation, if not global-wide, opioid crisis. And the only justice we've gotten for this as a society has been the family still makes plenty of money, none of them are going to jail, and maybe they have to take their name off a building or two, which is like, nobody's going to look at that. No regular ass human being.
Yeah, that's such a silly consequence.
I think that's honestly,
such a rich person consequence. It's like, oh, you don't get to have this building named after you.
Bro, and then don't be surprised if you see like a fucking revenge movie where it's like, oh, John Wick is now going to hunt down all the opioid producers and fucking kill them. Like, sure, that movie is like obviously far-fetched and shit, but like, I think, just our overall sense of like inability to do anything within society.
I want to sketch out specifically what feels like morally reprehensible that they're doing, right? So let's assume it is the case that they knew that these drugs were addictive, and they financially incentivized their prescribing, right? So like doctors get kickbacks or something like that, or, you know, they tell doctors that they are not addictive, right? So doctors unwittingly, or, you know, for perhaps for their own financial gain, are then prescribing these to people, and then they're immiserating, you know, tens of thousands of people, and, you know, like lives are lost because people, you know, patients are told that this is, you know, something that's prescribed for their own good, and there's either financial incentive or just a lack of clarity about what's actually going on. There's something about that seems like if these people are knowingly doing that, knowingly prescribing or encouraging doctors to prescribe drugs for their own benefit that are going to be harmful to people, that feels evil to us, right? And we know that we're never going. Those people who are doing that are never going to be able to understand the extent of their actions, because they're just like not living, you know, in the homes of all the people who have lost loved ones, right? Like there's a limit to their capacity to understand. And also, like, the punishment, like you said, is going to be like they lose some money, or their name's off a building, or, you know, even if they were in jail, I think perhaps that would be a sense of justice. But I don't really feel like that's doing anything. Like, people still are dead, you know. Like, I still find it like our society has been irreparably changed because of the access that we once had to these drugs. Maybe not irreparably, but for, you know, 2 generations, 3 generations, you know, I mean, there are ripple effects that I don't think we'll ever really be able to own up. So when we think about the real world, there are so many like nuances and dimensions, and the idea that things won't be fulfilled, it creates this sense in us where it's like, well, what if they were, though? Like, what if people really did get what was coming to them? And revenge narratives kind of put that in a nice little box that you get to open, and you get to feel the whole range of emotion. You get to feel the disappointment at the very beginning, and then you get to feel the person triumphing, and then you get to watch the suffering of the antagonist, and that is cathartic. You know, that is like, we don't get this in the real world, and that is like we can feel complete in these narratives that are, you know, manufactured by people.
Yeah, I guess like where I start to get dissatisfied with that is, thinking about it now, is that like all the bad guys are usually like fucking thugs. Like, all the bad guys is like, oh, this is a Russian mobster. Oh, this is like Compton gang. Oh, this is like organized crime. And it's like, I get it. Like, they like organized crime thugs are the video game enemy of movies. Like, you can palette swap them, you can give them different abilities. Like, John Wick turns into a fucking video game, like, by the second movie, where it's like, oh, the bad guys now have shields. The bad guys now can see through night vision goggles. And it's like, holy shit, this is so fun to watch, because there's, like, a power escalation. But, like, it doesn't, like, it feels, in terms of catharsis, it feels like eating a potato chip. Like, just very, like, it's tasty for, like, 5 seconds, and then you're still like horribly dissatisfied, and like you probably will eat another chip and continue to be dissatisfied, because like it is so many steps removed from what the actual problem is, that like I don't even know if it gives you the proper catharsis, right? I don't know if John Wick needs to kill a bunch of fucking pharmacists to get that catharsis, but like losing someone to shitty practices of pharmaceutical companies and doctors, I don't know if that would feel so alleviated or spoken towards if somebody were to watch Kill Bill or John Wick or play God of War or read Hamlet. Like, yeah, that's kind of my thought on that.
It's providing someone with a sense of control, or, you know, like God of War is allowing you to create mass destruction as a way of giving you a sense of control, because you cannot find that level of control in your real world, or you cannot commit acts of violence against the people who have angered you most without facing social, you know, and legal consequences. Of course, it's just a proxy, though. Like, you're never going to feel fully fulfilled, and that's why we have multiple revenge narratives, and that's why we have multiple narratives that are not about revenge also, that are about love, you know, and about you know, horror, and you know, we have all these genres because there's a range of feelings that we want to have, and when we finished feeling those things, you know, maybe we jump directly into another movie, or maybe we wait a week and we watch another movie, you know, depending on how, you know, different people consume media. But, you know, it's rare that I don't think I've ever met someone who watched one movie and was like, oh, I'm good. I felt like all the ranges of feelings that I needed to possibly feel from that one thing, you know? We are curious about how different people are interpreting their experiences and distilling them into narratives. Are there any other games you want to shout out, by the way, or like?
So the one thing I will mention that I just haven't played, so I really can't speak too much on this, is The Last of Us 2. Like, that's probably the highest profile game in like the most recent memory that was straight up about revenge, and then also about explicitly how revenge kind of corrupts everything. So doing that with their main character, and then showing basically the two sides to the revenge coin. It's essentially The Last of Us 2 is two revenge tales happening at once, which narratively I find kind of cool. I haven't played the game, and it seems like a lot of sentiment is very mixed around it, but you have like one character going for revenge for the loss of a loved one, and then you have another character who's going for revenge for loss of a loved one in the original game. So then when those two heads collide, like what happens at the end and yada, yada, yada. I think that is a cool, at least like premise and like idea around a revenge tale. I don't know if the execution was like very well. I know pretty much like most of the game just through, you know, like YouTube videos and playthroughs and stuff like that. I kind of would like to play it at one point, but really we're just focusing on the narrative here. So like, that's something that I don't think I've seen very often. Is like two revenge tales coming together at a head, and then like, you know, trying to handle that in a somewhat realistic way. Outside of that, though, I can't really think of any like big revenge tales in games that like call out to me. I had recently played Bloodroots before we started talking about this episode, but that's essentially Kill Bill with like some more colorful like wording.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing I would be remiss if we didn't talk about this during the episode, just because I guess I'm curious about how this fits into revenge. Is, you know, I was thinking about when we would play like World of Warcraft as kids, and you know, that game we would play on PvP servers, right? And there would just be these like bouts of playtime where our characters would get killed, and then by other players, right? We would be in some kind of neutral territory, and let's say we were level 20, right? And some other character who's level 80 comes up, kills us with one hit, waits for us to respawn, kills us, waits for us to respawn, kills us, and it's just on repeat. And their only goal is to destroy our gameplay experience, right? And that really does foster a kind of, like, I never did that to people. Like, I thought that was, like, do you have nothing better to do than just, like, prey on people who are not as high of a level as you? Like, there's something really predatory about it and, like, mean-spirited. And I know it's a PvP server and that's part of the game, and I'm not saying that, like, they're breaking the rules, you know, but if you were lucky, what you would do is you'd, like, get someone in your guild who's the same level to come and back you up, and then, like, you know, get this, like, chase this person away from you. But that's not revenge woven into the narrative of something, which I think is mostly what we've been talking about. That's like a mechanical revenge almost.
It's emergent revenge, yeah. Like similar to how somebody getting teabagged in Halo, it might be like, oh fuck you, like I'm gonna get you. This does sting more though, because you mentioned, like, you touched on time, right? So this person, whoever the griefer is in WoW, they are spending their time getting their fun by wasting other people's time. And that's kind of the biggest offense, is like, we've all come here to play the game, and now you are kind of holding me in place and stopping me from playing the game. It's like going to a Renaissance fair and then having one of the other attendees who's dressed up as a knight just hug you and hold you in place and not allow you to move. And you're like, what the fuck, dude? Like, we're both at the Renaissance fair. Why are you wasting your time just so that I can't move like 5 feet? Like, go play the fucking Renaissance fair, bro.
Right. And it's different than the Halo example, the teabagging Halo example, because the goal in Halo
is doesn't interrupt your play.
Eliminate the partner, right? Like, you are other player, right? Like, the goal, you're playing these, like, it's a shooter game versus, you know, with WoW, there are so many things to do. You know, you can go, like, work on your leatherworking, or you can, you know, complete quests, or do, like, PvP arenas. You know, there's so many, or, like, raids. so many options that like someone is choosing, in this open world, this vast open world, just to like be predatory toward you. Whereas like the teabagging is like a taunt after they've already killed you, which was their assignment from the beginning. They booted up the game. You both had the same goal of killing this other person. But there's so much more agency that I think in WoW that I think it fosters, when you're getting ganked, it fosters that kind of like that rage to build, especially if it's happening repeatedly.
Yeah. And, talking about World of Warcraft, I think it might be good to mention the Make Love, Not Warcraft episode of South Park, where they're trying to play their game, and then that which has no life appears, and he has the Sword of a Thousand Truths or whatever, and he's killing everyone in one hit. And so the boys are like, wow, fuck that. Like, I love playing World of Warcraft. Let's kill this fucking asshole and save the rest of the game, because there's like some B plot where the Blizzard employees literally don't know how this guy is so high level that they can't make NPCs to kill him.
They modded the game. That's hilarious. Yeah,
it's like, since
I was a kid. Yeah, that's
I fucking love that episode to this day. It's so good when that guy is like, "How do you kill that which has no life?" Talking about the fucking nerd. So funny. So yeah, I mean that's also a revenge tale, I think, in WoW, right? Because they get killed over and over again. They're like us. They just kept getting grief. They couldn't level up properly. And so what they were forced to do, because this big griefing asshole was in the server, they had to stay in the starting areas and kill starting level boars until they got to that insane power level. And that's
really
that's
it's not even possible. I mean, that's like
it's not.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And like this is the architecture of revenge that we were talking about earlier. Is like our protagonists are facing the adversity of like not being able to play the game that they very much enjoy and that they play together. Like they want this like to continue their friendship in this game, and they need to take care of that. And so the antagonist's power is like growing as they're like killing and modding whatever the fuck, and the protagonists are slowly like going into conflict to get stronger and stronger. And fucking Stan's dad to be fully cliche, Stan's dad is like, I got the Sword of a Thousand Truths here, take it. And they're figuring out how to transfer inventory, and then like Stan's dad gets killed and he's like, no, father, and then, immediately takes the revenge strike to like win the game. And that all is super fun, and I think it speaks to us specifically because we had dealt with that specific issue. It's way more exaggerated and lampooned, but like we knew that fucking pain, and that was like a very good specific catharsis for us. Like, yeah, this is how Stranglethorn Vale should be fucking run. Give me the Sword of a Thousand Truths. So today I'm going to be talking about network topology and how I relate it to level design to an extent. And if you're unfamiliar with network topology, Wikipedia describes it as the arrangement of elements such as links, nodes, etc. of a communication network, right? So if we're talking about, let's just say your home has 4 computers. If the 4 computers are the nodes, they can be linked up in a certain way via Wi-Fi, whatever, LAN cables, and now you have a network topology because you have multiple nodes connected. So the network topology can be used to define or describe the arrangement of various types of telecommunication networks, including command and control radio networks and computer networks. So how that kind of goes into what I'm talking about with level design and stuff is like you have these major archetypes of network topology. Point to point, which is like line format. You're just going A to B to C to D, which could be seen like a more traditional Call of Duty game, right? It's a linear shooter. You're going from like combat to combat. You're not really deviating off of any path. You have like a ring structure, which is all the nodes are connected in a ring-like shape, and they can only be accessed, each node can only be accessed from the left and right to what it connects to. Something that's way more familiar to everyone is the star format, which we can call hub and spoke. You have that central unit, and much like Mario 64, right, you have Princess Peach's castle, which is your hub. You walk around to the different rooms, which then contain the painting, which is your spoke. So you're always returning back to the hub in order to access different levels or spokes within the game. And from there, you have like tree, which is like you go to a node and then that kind of branches into three different sections or something like that.
Wait, but before you describe more, I'm just curious. Like,
Yeah,
is it like, let's say I'm Googling something, right? Like,
yeah.
is that is this like a star shaped type thing where my computer is at home and it's bouncing a signal to Google servers and they're bouncing it back, or like I don't understand exactly how my computer, like I have a home network, right? And
Yeah.
is this about my home network, or is this about how my home network is responding to? Are we talking about the internet here? Like, is this just LAN parties?
It's less the internet. Like it's there. It definitely could be partially the internet, but let's just look at it as LAN for now, because that's like
Okay.
way easier to visualize.
So what is the purpose of having a ring network? Let's say we're if we're just thinking about LAN, right? If or
It's so think about it as let's think about it like we had firemen as all of these nodes, and the
Okay.
information we want to transfer between firemen is the water bucket, right? So
Okay.
if I have a line network topology, and I have like 4 points along the line for firemen, if I want to get information from fireman A to fireman D, fireman A needs to now pass it to every single fireman along the line, right? Whereas if I have a star, I could have a fireman at the center and then 5 firemen around him, and I can get information to each. I could get the water bucket to them quicker because now they need the center fireman to either pass it to him or have the center fireman pass it to the person that needs the bucket, right?
Okay, and for games, it makes sense to me that we would have like a corridor shooter or like a linear type of game versus an open world type of game, right? But
Yeah.
I don't see why you wouldn't always want the most amount of connections possible. Is that just in like network topology? Is that just a waste of resources?
That's part of it. It could be a waste of resources. There's also the fact of like cognitive load on the player. And if they are presented with far too many options to begin with and no like set direction, it creates a sense of aimlessness, creates a sense of like the game isn't playing with you per se.
Okay, it's not streamlined.
It's not streamlined, yeah. Like there's certainly times where you want that, right? And so I've talked about the line, I've talked about ring format, I've talked about star format, a bit about tree. Mesh is the next thing I was going to mention. Mesh is the fully open, fully connected like type of setup. So similar to star where you have like a center point and then 5 around it, you remove the center point and then you connect all those nodes in the ring format to each other. So now, like, the firemen can basically pass it to whichever fireman they want, like, whether they be on their left, their right, front a little bit to the left, front a little bit to the right. Like, each node has access to the other nodes. That can get you information around the quickest. But when it comes to level design, if I'm dropped into a level and there's like 7 hallways for me to traverse with a bunch of different rooms that are open, I don't really know where I should go first, right? Whereas if we juxtapose that with something like Raccoon City Police Department in the Resident Evil 2 remake, it is very much it's actually well it's kind of like Star, honestly. The main hall with the statue and the Marvin, that is like your center point, and I guess it's either star or tree, honestly. I don't have it like fully pinned down on RPD, but the idea is you have this room, a lot of shit is closed off, and you're slowly using tools and key items to open up new pathways to different nodes, right? So that's kind of where my level design stuff is starting to play in more. Is that like, how do we use these shapes and topology types to then layer on the gameplay stuff and say like, okay, do we want a just straight linear level? Then how are we going to make that interesting, right? Like, do we want the player to be able to freely run from node A to node D, or do we want to like throw in a combat encounter or like a key with some sort of special gate to unlock? As for like higher level questions, it's as simple and complex as asking like, what topology shape are we even looking for here? Like, are we doing an action packed level? Then maybe like a line shape will be fine. Are we doing like a scary look around for things level? Then maybe a star or a mesh would be better. Or are we trying to do something that maybe feels a little labyrinthian? Maybe we'll go for a tree shape or some sort of hybrid.
It's interesting that you're using technology, like recent like innovations in technology, to like create new technological innovations, or you're taking how networks are used which really doesn't have anything to do with video games, right? Like
No.
this is almost metaphorical.
It's information technology. It's IT work.
Right. And then you're using like IT engineering as a way to think about video games differently. And video games obviously are a form of tech. So, it's like tech influencing tech. I love that. I think that's, I don't know. I'm just glad that you're.
Yeah, it's really fun, dude.
That.
Like, I love going and finding new shit that I can then somehow apply to level design or some sort of game design, because something I often hear, or at least did often hear, I guess, like during academia, was your design output is like the amalgamation of all your life experiences and knowledge. And so to kind of like avoid stagnation and also to come up with really cool shit, I try to put myself as far away from video games when trying to figure out stuff for video games. And so IT network topology stuff like had come up recently. And I think before that, I was actually looking at interior design, like house making stuff. And maybe
you've looked at architecture. You've looked at architecture in the past too, so yeah, and all those things really make sense for level design too. I mean, interior design absolutely is actual level design of like real people's homes. It's like
and funny thing about that, and maybe I'll save that for another skill tree. But it's always about, for the interior design at least, it always is like cramming everything into as small a box as possible. Whereas like with level design, sure, you definitely want to do that, but you also are trying to pay like big mind to like, how much space do I need for these enemies to attack? How much space do I need for the player to move around or do like a somersault, that type of thing.
Thank you for listening to Deep in the D-Pad. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and share us with your friends.
For updates and discussion, follow us on Reddit at r/deepinthedpad, Facebook at deepdpad, and subscribe to Deep in the D-Pad on YouTube. Don't forget to hit the bell.
And if you want to ask us questions or you had a chance to share your own D-Pad delight on the show, email us at askdeepinthedpad@gmail.com. Be sure to put question or delight in the subject line.
Big thanks to 8-Bit Jazz and Kevin MacLeod for supplying the music for the show.